to being spun. I mean, who wound this guy up? When I saw this, they're talking about how he kept an immaculate garden, and he often tended to other neighbors' gardens as well. Do you remember the movie back in 1979, Being There? Peter Sellers, Shirley MacLaine, Chance the gardener. You know, they go to this house. He was kind of a gardener and butler for a very wealthy man who died, and he just kept doing it. He was this clueless guy, you know, kind of living like James Holmes is now, the Aurora, Colorado shooter. And but he was out doing the gardening dressed as a butler, and they come up and they talk to him. They didn't really know that he was the gardener. And he says, oh, I'm Chance the gardener. And they go, Chance the gardener. Oh, okay. And so all these people who are the most powerful politicians and businessmen, they're coming here to see him, and they ask him these questions, and he is absolutely, totally clueless about what they're talking about. And he answers with these non sequiturs. And at first they're kind of taken back, and they think, wow. And they read into what he has to say, these non-responses to what they're saying. They read all kinds of deep philosophical meaning in it. Let's play a little bit of clip about that. And they think he's this guru. Let's play a little clip from that trailer.
I'm Chance the gardener.
The gardener?
Yes. Since I was a child, I worked in this garden.
Then you really are a gardener?
Oh, yes.
May I ask your name?
But they don't really believe he's a gardener. They imply all of these motives to him, and he's this
Mr. Chancey Gardner,
totally disconnected guy like the shooter in the UK.
Gardner?
No, I'm not related to Basil and Perdita.
Gobbledygook.
And there's a black lady who worked with him at the house, and when they put him on television as this guru, she's saying, he's an idiot. He doesn't know anything. Portray him as something.
Brains at all.
Has got no brains at all.
With rice pudding between the ears.
On television, Mr. President, you look much smaller.
Dumb as a jackass.
That's the way. That's like, and it goes on and on like this. He gets to the president. He goes on television. He becomes a close advisor to all these captains of industry and political figures, and they're just continue to read into this man what they want to read into him. Now, they're not doing that in a way with this guy, but this guy is just this passive individual that has been a tool, a patsy of the elite. He's not fooling the elite. The elite are using him to fool you. They're using him to forward their agenda. That's what I truly believe. A very, very funny movie, and I'm not making light of the tragedy. Yes, this lady was brutally murdered. You don't know what turned Chance the gardener into the Joker. I mean, you know, this people should be asking that question, just as they should be asking the question, what turned James Holmes into this vegetable with a Joker wig? You know, what wigged him out? What changed this guy who was one of the brightest researchers in the country? What changed him into this catatonic Joker? Where did he get all of this equipment to do this? Nobody's asking about that transformation. Nobody is asking about this transformation of this guy, Tommy Mayer, who I will now call Chance the gardener. Nobody's asking about that. Nobody thinks it's suspicious that it happened exactly 1 week before the vote. And of course, nothing will be talked about except not only the tragic side of the loss with this, but portraying it as racism. Southern Poverty Law Center, always there. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about terror watch lists. What's behind that? Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host. We're going to talk about some breaking news as well as what's going on with the terror watch list. What do you need to watch about this terror watch list? I think it is the most dangerous thing that is being proposed. It's not just that it's coming against our Second Amendment. It's not just that it's going to be an infringement of our fundamental rights, another effort to change them into privileges, but we are going into these different devices. We are taking away all due process, and we're moving rapidly towards tools and devices and mechanisms on the part of the government that are the hallmarks of tyranny throughout history. Before we get to that, I want to tell you that we've got a sale right now. You've seen Tim Kennedy on talking about how certain products that he has used at InfoWarsLife.com, how valuable they were to him and his workout, how they gave him a boost. And we've got some of his favorite products here: Super Male Vitality, Brain Force, Secret 12. We have them all as part of a Tim Kennedy special. Of course, he Special Forces operator, still in Special Forces. He's a UFC fighter, famous in his own right as a fighter, but he is a professional athlete. And so he knows what gets his body going. He's very much in tune to his body, more so than most people are. And he had this run through the Sporting Association, had them check it to make sure it wasn't going to violate any rules. They said, yep, safe. And he's telling us it's also effective. And so we've got some of his favorite supplements: Super Male Vitality, Brain Force, Secret 12, 15% off at InfoWarsLife.com. These are the products Tim Kennedy uses in his Special Forces and UFC training that help him get to the next level. We also have 20% off of Alexa Pure water filters. And this is all water filters. This isn't just the big water filter units. It's also even the smaller ones like the shower head units. Everything that's a water filter from Alexa Pure right now, 20% off at InfoWarsStore.com. You know, not only do you need to filter out the water that you drink, but even the water that you shower with. If you're in the city and they're putting in chlorine, look at the effects of chlorine when you heat it up and spray it out of the shower heads. That's why a lot of people will get a shower filter to keep from breathing the chlorine that is coming out of the shower. So all the products that are water filters from Alexa Pure, from the super high-quality gravity-fed Alexa Pure Pro water filtration systems all the way down to the shower filters, they're all 20% off right now at InfoWarsStore.com. Okay. Some of the news today, we've got Marco Rubio says he is now going to run for re-election to the Senate. Interesting. He's back. Just when you thought he was gone for good, he's back. And as we see also Sanders, who said he was staying in to the very end so that he could have some leverage at the convention. There's a report up on Politico that he is losing his leverage. As every day goes by, he's becoming more and more yesterday's story. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the Democrat convention, if anything happens. Or will Hillary have a complete lock? Now, along those lines, we have said all along that not only was the process rigged in the way that most people can plainly see. She started out with, 15% of the way she needed to be towards the finish line with the superdelegates. The whole process is rigged in that way, very openly, very openly. But because of all of these superdelegates, and about 15% of them, 10 to 15% in each state, were reserved for superdelegates, the delegates that were going to go to the convention. That meant that he would have to beat her by 10 or 15% in order to get the same number of delegates, because the Democrat Party makes every state a proportional allocation of delegates. So it's not a winner-take-all anywhere. So even if he beat her, and even if he beat her by 10 to 15 points, they wound up getting the same number of delegates. Anytime she beat him, it was a skunk, because she would get whatever edge she had, plus the 10 or 15% of the delegates that were already there. But of course, there's other ways that they rigged the election as well. And this is what we have to be concerned about when we come to the fall. And I talked about this back when we had the Utah primary. I thought it was kind of suspicious that the GOP had gone out and paid $80,000 in Utah to bring in Smartmatic. Now, this is the largest electronic voting machine company in the world. But it is also a voting machine company that has, I would say, the longest rap sheet in the world. Smartmatic started in Venezuela by some friends of Hugo Chavez. And they were involved in election after election that American officials said were being rigged by Hugo Chavez. And then they started selling their machines elsewhere throughout Central and South America, as well as the Philippines. And there is a long list from the Philippines to the Tabasco region in Mexico to Brazil to other Central and South American countries where people have said, hey, something is wrong. Something is wrong. The voting machines go down. All of a sudden, 25% of the votes are just gone, and there's no audit trail with these machines. They just disappeared. How about that? Would you like to have an election where 25% of the votes, millions, tens of millions of votes just disappear? Well, that's already happened in some countries. And the more we put these electronic machines here, the more that's going to happen in America. And it will happen in America. In Brazil, where there is the currently the struggle for power that's going on there with a very, very unpopular female socialist president. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? She was roundly booed just before the election at a soccer event. She was down 10 points in the poll, and yet she suddenly won by 10 points or so on the re-election. And the interesting thing about that was that they didn't do any exit polls, because exit polls are one of the indications when you have somebody that is losing an election before, and they are maybe losing in the election afterwards by exit polls, but then the official polls say, hey, they won by a large margin. Everybody knows there was fraud involved. And so they shut that down. And the company that always did that for Brazil, that always did the exit polls for Brazil, just decided they weren't going to do them for that particular election. And then they got tens of millions of dollars in contracts from the Brazilian government afterwards. Looked like payola. Now, why am I going into this history of this? Well, because we've got an organization here. This is a report from DC Clothesline, a racketeering lawsuit exposing nationwide vote rigging and DNC primaries could derail Clinton, they say. This is a major lawsuit. It's on the verge of being filed by the Institute for American Democracy and Election Integrity. They were going to file it last week, but they said, no, we want to wait and get the results from California, because that was very important, and we think there may have been fraud there. They're going to take a look at that first, get that information, and possibly include that in the lawsuit. The group claims that in about 11 states, there has been a noted significant difference between exit polls and the electronic vote totals presented in the mornings after the primaries. These differences show votes appear to be shifted from Bernie Sanders to Hillary Clinton. You think they'd do that? And so we see, when we look at, they've got a table here, and they're showing the margin between them and the exit polls and the discrepancies in favor of Clinton versus the other polls that were there. And the interesting thing about this, of course, is that when you look at the margin, what is statistically significant? Well, they say that the U.S. government itself says that if there's more than a 2% difference between the official election polls and the exit polls, that is the boundary by which the U.S. government determines whether an election in another country has probably been stolen. And notice that the exit polls in these 11 states, they say, 2016 DNC primaries, they were significantly more than a 2% difference. One of them was, I think it was, over 10% difference, okay? There. They say this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of democracy, or I should say integrity. We need to have honest elections. And there's a number of ways that the elections can be stolen. They can be stolen by superdelegates, by the other processes. They can be stolen by having illegitimate voters. They can be stolen by stuffing the electronic ballot machines. That's one of the easiest ways to steal the elections. The easiest way is by electronic means. They say Richard Sharnon, a mathematician, statistician, author of the book Matrix of Deceit, has been reporting on the apparent shifting of electronic vote totals and the non-release of raw data from Edison polling research, okay? I'll tell you who they are in just a moment, since 2004. So he's been looking at this for 12 years. He's well known for what he calls the red shift. He says it's been a shift between exit polls and electronic vote totals, a difference of about 4 to 5% each year. And this constitutes a shift to the political right. You understand? This is not about left and right. It's not about Democrat, Republican. This is about corruption. And this is about rigging electronic voting machines and how easy it is to do it. And this guy who's been researching it for 12 years says typically it's a red shift. Typically it's a shift towards the red candidates, okay? And I hate the fact that they do that, because red really has always been the color of communism. That's deliberately why they reversed that on you, by the way. Deliberately why they did that. But it's been a shift towards the right, let's just put it that way, or conservatives, of about 4 to 5% each year. Very suspicious. But now what they saw in the primaries was a massive shift for Hillary Clinton. Now, the same people who are rigging this system for the GOP, if that's what's been going on, do you think that they could possibly rig this to make sure that Hillary Clinton wins? Because we've already got Ted Cruz meeting with GOP conservatives in a secret meeting reported by The Hill, saying, we're planning to see what happens in the next election. They're hoping that Donald Trump is going to lose because they're opposed to him, because he opposes their globalist agenda of open borders, of trade treaties that were written by the corporations, of continual foreign wars. He opposes all of that. And so for those reasons alone, he must be stopped. Those are the vital